comparing it to what Elon Musk is spewing out, unfortunately, on X, you sound like Brett Stevens now, with all due respect. It's a joke. That's a real time.
And you sound like him, who looks like Rachel Maddow. Ken Martin guy, he said something I've heard Democrats say a lot. We didn't get our message out. Maybe I'm paraphrasing, but and I've said this before to Democrats. No, you did. That's the problem. You did get your message out, and people don't like the message.
But it was Axios that they gave the new media seat to, and that is to Mike Allen, who is like an established reporter in Washington. Axios has been around for like 5 years, sold for $500 million. I don't really consider it new media, and I thought it was interesting that was their first new media.
It is new media, because old media sells for $1.
That is true.
The woke propaganda machine is in overdrive, but one man is hitting the brakes and calling out the hypocrisy: Bill Maher. The outspoken liberal comedian isn't afraid to take aim at his own side, and this time, he just shut down an MSNBC host, who went all in on Trump derangement. So what exactly did the host say to spark this showdown? And how did Maher's brutal clapback leave them speechless? I've got all the details right here. Stick around, this one's going to be, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button for more must-watch content.
Martin?
Yep.
I was not aware of who he was before. I did not think it got off to a great start, because I think they need to completely reroute themselves, and I don't think they did it. What do you think?
Let's pause for a moment and really focus on the question and Chris Hayes' response. The question was simple. Bill Maher wanted to know how the Democrats plan to regroup after their election losses to Donald Trump. Now, pay close attention to how Hayes answers.
I think there's sort of two different imperatives that are in a little bit of tension with each other. So one, I think there's an imperative right now for the party to stand up against the most destructive things that Musk and Trump are doing. And I think they're doing some genuinely destructive things. I mean, there's people walking around the world right now with like devices inside their bodies from clinical trials sponsored by USAID that they can't get out. The guards that were guarding ISIS prisoners in Syria were paid on USAID salaries that got cut off. There's a 25-year-old mucking around the code base of the Treasury system. So there's things they have to do to try to oppose. But it's also the case that like all of the reflection that happened after losing that election and trying to figure about how do you win back people you lost was real and true. And I guess my feeling is you got to fight, you got to try different things, and you have to be authentic. You can't like reverse engineer any of this off a blueprint. And I really think this is true about politics. Steve Jobs once said, it's not the customer's job to know what they want. Like, it's our job. And you couldn't have reverse engineered Barack Obama off of George W. Bush. And you couldn't have reverse engineered Donald Trump off of Barack Obama. What happens in the end of an election is everyone sifts through the data and they come up with their perfect, their plan based on, well, this worked and with this group and we got to tack here and there. And what politics about is a certain point is like innovation and communication. You got to come up with new stories.
So, according to Chris Hayes, it's not the customers' right to decide what they want, just like it's not the voters' right to choose their leader. Instead, the choice has to be made for them. In the world of the Democrats, they claim the power to decide what voters should want. Sounds ridiculous, right? Now get ready for Bill Maher's epic takedown.
Martin guy, he said something I've heard Democrats say a lot. We didn't get our message out. Maybe I'm paraphrasing, but and I've said this before to Democrats. No, you did. That's the problem. You did get your message out, and people don't like the message.
Bill Maher shut Chris Hayes down with one brutal truth. People didn't like the message. Period. Game over. While Hayes went in circles about reverse engineering strategies and juggling multiple battlefronts, Maher got straight to the point. The issue wasn't buried under layers of political jargon. It was simple. Give people what they actually want. Hayes' overcomplicated response only exposed the growing disconnect between the Democratic Party and the average voter. Instead of addressing why their message fell flat, he dodged the obvious. But Maher wasn't buying it. He made it clear. This isn't about strategy or optics, it's about substance. Voters heard the Democratic message loud and clear. They just didn't like it. That's the hard truth the left keeps ignoring. No amount of spin can save a message that doesn't resonate. Until Democrats realize that, they'll keep losing ground. And if you think that was bad, wait until you hear what Hayes said next.
I think that I don't think there's anyone who hasn't had a moment across the political spectrum of some form of progressive communication that's either left them bewildered or a little like, I don't know about that. But I also think at the same time, there is a message of what I would call like common sense, patriotic pluralism. Yeah. That is a majority message, which is like, if some father and mother have health care for their kid lined up who's trans, just stay the fuck out of their business. Like, and let them make that decision. That's their decision to make. And you don't have to make that for your family.
Classic, when backed into a corner, the woke mob loves to muddy the waters. This time, Chris Hayes claims that if parents choose gender-affirming care for their kids, it's their decision alone and no one else's business. But here's the problem. That's not the real debate, and it's certainly not the broader agenda being pushed. Bill Maher isn't buying it, and he wastes no time calling out the misdirection and setting the record straight.
The argument is whether the child should make the decision.
But the child is never making the decision. The parents are always making the decision. Parents consent to medical care.
Well, here in California, you're allowed to hide it from the parents if the kid is.
Yes.
Thank you, one person who knows that.
But I mean,
somebody knows that is the case.
The real agenda wasn't just about parental choice or supporting kids. It was about giving schools the power to decide whether a child could keep their transition a secret from their own parents. Think about that. Life-altering. Decisions hidden from the very people responsible for their well-being, while schools played the role of gatekeepers. Parents, who are legally and morally responsible for their children, could be completely shut out of critical decisions about their child's health and identity. And now, just months after the election, it seems like the left is desperately running from its own message. Can you blame them? If my stance was this extreme, disconnected, and borderline dystopian, I'd be sprinting away too. This isn't just about politics. It's about common sense, parental rights, and protecting the family unit. The idea that bureaucrats and school officials know better than parents is not just absurd, it's dangerous. And most Americans won't stand for it. Deep down, even the left knows this. That's why they're backpedaling, softening their stance and pretending this was never their position in the first place. Because when these radical policies are exposed under the spotlight, even they realize how indefensible they really are. And that's exactly why voters walked away from the Democrats. Not because they lacked a message, but because their message was out of touch with reality. Of course, legacy media plays right along, covering for every misstep. But that's exactly why new media has become the real force shaping Trump's re-election. And when Bill Maher confronted a leftist with this reality, her reaction said it all. Listen to what she had to say.
What do you think of the Trump White House admitting more influencers and podcasters into the press corps? Yeah, the press room is different. I mean, it reflects America.
I think it's great.
Yeah, you do.
But it's mostly right-wing influencers and podcasters, obviously, but I think it's a good step. I mean, this is how people are getting their news.
It is. I mean, how can you deny it?
I was actually over there the other day, and it's packed in there. And I think even all the reporters, whether you're Legacy or the podcasting people, they're all happy. And then they have like the one rotating chair, which I guess is pretty cool. So there's always like somebody new that comes in.
So this is you're at the White House, you're talking about?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was Axios that they gave the new media seat to, and that is to Mike Allen, who is like an established reporter in Washington. Axios has been around for like 5 years, sold for $500 million. I don't really consider it new media, and I thought it was interesting that was their first new media.
It is new media, because old media sells for $1.
That is true.
Well, what do you mean by that?
Well, that's what Bezos bought the Washington Post for. He bought it for like $1, didn't he?
Byron Donalds made a sharp and insightful point. Legacy media isn't just watching the Democrats' downfall from the sidelines. They're part of the problem. From spinning narratives to burying major stories, they've shot themselves in the foot, and in doing so, they've created the perfect opening for independent media to take center stage. But did you catch how a guest tried to brush off Trump's game-changing move to invite podcasters and independent journalists to the White House? She dismissed it by arguing that Axios doesn't really count as new media because it's been around for 5 years and was bought for $500 million. That was her reasoning, as if a media company's age or price tag somehow determines its independence. Here's the real kicker: the woke left still can't grasp reality, even when it's staring them in the face. The media landscape has fundamentally changed, It's no longer about a handful of corporate giants controlling the narrative. It's about authenticity, real connections, and the raw power of independent voices speaking directly to the people. And maybe that's why legacy media feels so threatened. While they cling to outdated definitions and status symbols, new media is out there engaging with everyday Americans, telling the stories that matter and shaping conversations the establishment desperately wants to ignore.